Hi everyone, Jenna McPhee here. I'm going to be talking again with Peter Ashley. He's going to be talking about Colonel John Small.
There's actually quite a bit to Colonel Small's career, so I'm going to be looking off my notes, but he was born on March 13th, 1726 in Strathardoll, Perthshire, Scotland. He had two brothers. One was Alexander, one was James. Alexander also entered the British service, but he entered as a surgeon. So he was a doctor. His family would be considered upper class, and they certainly had military connections. So when John got old enough, they purchased a commission. And I should stop there and mention what that means for the people who are unaware. In today's military, you get increases in rank based upon years of service, attaining higher levels in a trade or something like that. But in the 1700s, you got to be an officer only if you could afford it, and it cost a lot of money. So when his family purchased a commission for him, it was as an ensign, and it was in, of all things, the Scots Brigade in the Netherlands. So obviously at that time, there was still a lot of friction between the English and the Scots, and so that's where he got his start in his military career. By the time the French-Indian War was rolling around, in 1756 he obtained a lieutenant's commission in the 42nd Regiment of Foot, or the Royal Highlanders, and many people refer to them as the Black Watch. And that's what this tartan is. It's the government set, and it's referred to as the Black Watch tartan. When he got that commission as a lieutenant in the 42nd, he took part with the regiment when they departed and went to North America as part of the 7 Years' War, but in North America it was called the French-Indian War, primarily because it was the British against the French and the native people that were allied with the French. He departed for North America. He took part in two major battles, one at Fort Oswego and another at Fort Ticonderoga, which were both in New York State. He accompanied General Sir Jeffrey Amherst to Lake Champlain, and he was also present with him at the surrender by the French of Montreal. He also went with the 42nd Regiment to the Caribbean because it was basically a world war, the 7 Years' War. And so the regiment was dispatched to the Caribbean, where they took part in the invasion of Martinique and also in action in Cuba, which was more against the Spanish than it was against the French, because the Spanish were allied with the French. At the end of the war, the French and Indian War, he was put on half pay, which was standard for officers at the end of a conflict. And then, but he was only on half pay for a very short time, and he received a commission in the 21st Regiment, which was the North British Fusiliers. North Britain being, of course, what the British referred to as Scotland. At the outbreak of the American Revolution, he sought, along with Alan McLean, Colonel Alan McLean, to create a Highland regiment in North America comprised of veterans from the French and Indian War that settled in North America and immigrants from Scotland. They were given the beating order, which is the go-ahead from General Thomas Gage, and then they formed the two battalions of the regiment. Major Small, that's what he was at that time, he was given a commission as major, was to be in command of the 2nd Battalion of what was to be called the Royal Highland Immigrants, but he called his battalion the Young Royal Highlanders, and there was probably a good reason for that, because he was a member of the Royal Highland Regiment, the 42nd. So he said, well, this is a younger version of it. Not necessarily meaning the men were younger, because some of them were veterans of the French and Indian War, but he called them the Young Royal Highlanders. He spent most of the war in New York as a staff officer at headquarters and was named Brigade Major. During the war, probably his most memorable moment was the color ceremony in 1777, which was conducted in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The color ceremony, first of all, the colors are the flags of the regiment. And part of when they were formed, they had sent Murdoch MacLean to Scotland to get all the materials for the uniforms, the arms and accoutrements that the regiment would need, both battalions. And it was at that time he also brought back colors that were handmade in Scotland, and they were beautiful works of art. I've heard many historians claim that they were among the most beautiful colors ever flown during the American Revolution. But they had an official ceremony in Halifax, and during that ceremony, it became evident that, yeah, John Small thought very highly of his soldiers. He said, "It will lead the men to cleanliness and neatness and dress, to abstain from drunkenness and every abject vice. It will render them attentive and diligent on duty, cool and brave in action. On all occasions, they will be patient, obedient, disinterested, and generous. Soldiers of this stamp are the noblest characters in society. They are beloved by their officers, who will never fail to grant them every possible indulgence. Nor is it the gratitude and generosity of their country, wanting to enable such illustrious ornaments of their profession, after a useful and glorious career, to spend the decline of life in tranquility, ease, and contentment in these honorable retreats, to recollect the memory of gallant actions, to relate their circumstances, to meet intervals with companions of former dangers, rekindle occasionally youthful ardor, and affords the purest and most exquisite pleasure, while the toil and pain that accompanies them are no more," which was about as rosy as you could make it sound to be in the Army. But as we saw on previous occasions when I talked about the settlement of Douglas Township, there was a lot of pain and a lot of toil and a lot of work, and so I don't know whether he was being a little too glorious in his statements or not. In fact, when they had the color ceremony, he also said, "And further, to mark, to encourage, and to reward merit as an incitement to virtue and worth, to correct errors and attempt at least reclaiming all those not incorrigibly addicted to vice, an order of merit will be established in this corps. Those who will fortunately acquire the honor of being admitted to that respectable situation will be distinguished by medals." There is no evidence that they were ever awarded, sort of like there was no evidence of them ever receiving 1 gold guinea as part of the conditions of enlisting. But the color ceremony and his entire speech was recorded in the Halifax newspaper, the Halifax Gazette and Weekly Chronicle, and it was also recorded in 2 New York newspapers. And because of that, we, the reenacted group of 84th Regiment Association, we were able to reenact that exact color ceremony after we had authentic colors created at fair cost. And we held that in Halifax, and because of Colonel John Small's speech. We were able to do that with every bit of detail. We had a chaplain in our regiment, an actual practicing Anglican priest who gave the benediction. We had the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia there. We had Major John Arch McGuinness, the commander of Land Force Atlantic. We had the commander of the British Reenactment Association of all North America there. He was their commander at the time. We had the Bishop of Nova Scotia. We had all the people that they had originally in 1777. After the war, of course, Colonel Small was given a grant of 81,500 acres of land in what is now East Hants, Douglas Township it was called. He was one of very few officers who stayed for a while. He did acquire land in what is now Selma. As a matter of fact, Selma was named after his country manor that he built here, which was called Selma Hall. And that's where a lot of the papers were kept for the assignment of the different land grants to the soldiers. He, however, went back to England, and 1793 he was appointed the Lieutenant Colonel of the the Lieutenant Governor of the island of Guernsey in the English Channel. And he only was there, he was also given an increase in rank to Major General, but he was only there in his official capacity for 3 years because he died in 1796. Part of the problem with that was he had left, the papers were left here in order for the grants to be legitimate. He had to be the one who signed them and conveyed them. He didn't do that for all the soldiers before he left, and his Selma Hall burnt down along with a lot of those papers. So the land was escheated or taken back in 1798, and as I mentioned previously, it resulted in a lot of conflict for some of those soldier settlers all the way up until 1860.